Hello and welcome to Everyday Lessons Every Day. I'm David McBee. Just a few short years ago, my family was walking on eggshells around me because, well, I was just filled with anxiety and anger and had a short temper. I knew I had to make a change before I lost them. So I turned to self-improvement books to work on myself. And after several months of reading every day and applying the lessons I learned, I was able to go from grumpy to grateful, and it was this journey that inspired me to write my book, Everyday Lessons Every Day. The power of personal development changed my life, and I believe that it can change the world. To that end, I invite everyday people to share their everyday lesson and how those lessons are changing their lives for the better. This week, I sat down with Tyler Foley, who is a father, spouse, actor, author, and public speaker. When I did my research on Tyler, I thought I knew what to expect from our interview. This is a guy who feeds off of applause and laughter. I know the feeling, Tyler. And I was expecting us to have a light and humorous conversation. What I got was much, much more. Yeah, Tyler has a sense of humor, and we laugh a bit during our time together, but truly the everyday lesson that he shared with me actually gave me goosebumps, and at one point, I was nearly speechless. As you listen, you'll probably notice that I just try to get out of Tyler's way and let him tell his story. This one is for anyone who is a little afraid to speak their truth, to tell their story, or to stand up and be heard. If that's you, I think this episode may have the power to change your life. Yeah, I know that's a big claim, and I stand by it. This is episode 49. Say the thing you're afraid to say. Good morning, Tyler. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well, David, and I gotta say, I've been really looking forward to coming up and discussing some everyday lessons with you.
Really?
I really enjoyed listening to your interview with Julie Burton, so that kind of
She's a fun lady, isn't she?
Oh, yeah. And Mike Papakota, I loved listening to what he had to say. And so there've been a few of your guests on that I have received value from. And so I've been looking forward to returning the favor and hopefully providing some value to your audience. And it's been good. I've been looking forward to it.
Thank you, Tyler. You just gave me the warm fuzzies. I appreciate that you're listening to the episodes and you're getting something out of them. So now it's your turn to pay back. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are first.
Well, so I would have to say I am a father, a husband, best-selling author, safety consultant, seeker of warm beaches, and mediocre ice hockey goaltender, all in that order.
That's a good explanation. How long have you been married and how old are your kids?
I have been married now for 11 years, dating the same woman for 15, and our daughter is going to be 6 years old in 6 days.
Oh, that is such a wonderful age. Like maybe the best.
I would have to agree with you. One of the great joys that I have been having, especially because we've had our daughter a little bit later than most. I'm going to be turning 42 in 6 + 7 is 13 days. We're exactly a week apart, my daughter and I, is to be able to re-experience the world through her eyes, to be able to see and to question a lot and have to re-examine a lot of my assumptions about how the world works in having to explain how the world works. And, it's the most torturous and yet the most giving question that she has is why, because she never stops asking it. But it's been great to be able to see the wonder in her eyes, to re-experience things has been one of the greatest gifts I've ever received.
Yeah, I'm 100% convinced that's why parents put their kids in sports, or they drag them along on the same interests that they had so that they can re-experience them, I grew up as a Boy Scout, and then of course when my son was old enough, you're doing Boy Scouts, and I got to experience it as a father, and it was a very different experience. So I totally get that. And you said you were a safety inspector. Just tell us real briefly about your job before we jump into your everyday lesson.
So I have been in health and safety, more specifically, a safety consultant as opposed to an inspector. I don't go through and inspect safety systems for their quality. I go through and audit safety programs in a quantity standpoint. I check to see what people said they were going to do as far as safety goes and if they're actually doing those things. And then I do a lot of training and keynote speaking on safety and safety philosophies.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, let's dive into your lesson. Where did it come from? Was it a book, a person, an experience?
To be honest, what I would love to put forward to your audience is that the thing that they're afraid to say is very likely the thing that the world needs to hear. As a public speaker, as a keynote presenter, as a speaker trainer now, um, I found that the best talks, whether you Google something on YouTube and you go to a TED talk or a TEDx talk, or you just look at some of the viral video posts that go out there, most of the people who are having an impact are saying the things that they were probably afraid to say up front, the thing that weighed heavily on their heart. And yet those are the things that bind us universally and speak to us and allow us to feel a sense of camaraderie and shared experience, because somebody else is probably afraid to say the thing too. And do you remember when you were in high school?
Kinda.
And yeah, I know it's a long time for us both, but somebody, you'd be writing an exam, right? And everybody would be quiet and you could hear them kind of like scribbling with their pencil. And then all of a sudden somebody would go, Mrs. or Mr. So-and-so, I don't get number 2. And and he would say, why? He'd be like, well, because the word says this, this, and this, and I don't understand it. And then the teacher would be like, oh, I've made a mistake on the exam. It's actually supposed to say this. And then everybody else would go, oh, yeah, I was having a hard time with that too. I didn't get it. Right? We're all afraid to speak up to be the one who is wrong, or for that sense of judgment that maybe we don't know what we're doing, or our experience doesn't matter. And yet when we speak up, all of a sudden everybody else around us goes, yes, I was experiencing that too, and I just didn't want to say anything. And it's when we have the courage to speak that thing that we're coveting, that we're maybe trying to protect, it doesn't do us any good. It's cancerous on us. And actually, studies have shown that it can develop into cancer when somebody is really holding on to anxiety and tightness within themselves. You can manifest some really horrible medical issues from that kind of stress and weight. And yet when we let it go, not only do we free ourselves of that burden, but we find the other people around us who may needed to have heard that they're not alone either. So the one big lesson that I would love to impart with everybody is, don't be afraid to say that thing. The thing you're afraid to say is probably the thing that the world needs to hear. And that could have significant impact on not only your life, but somebody else's life. And ultimately, isn't that what we're here for?
Tyler, I'm getting kind of this goosebump thing going on the back of my neck, right? Because you're speaking exactly my language. Um, when I was really struggling in my marriage and went through all my issues with, the anxiety, the anger, and my family walking on eggshells around me, I found a way to get past that. But I discovered very quickly that putting it into a book and sharing it with the world, the main feedback I get from people isn't, oh, it's a wonderful book. It's not particularly well written, it's all right. But what I do hear people say is, I appreciated how vulnerable you were and how honest you were and how you said a lot of the things that people are afraid to say. So I totally and completely agree with you 100%. Have you had that experience yourself where you spoke up and it changed you and the people around you?
Well, very often and regularly. And I'm somebody who, again, growing up performing since I was 6 years old. So we're 36 years into the acting bug in my life. Um, I had the luxury and the great joy to grow up in a very open society where uh, it was encouraged to speak up, especially for somebody like me. Typically we're trying to explain to children, you need to be quiet, right? You seen, not heard, which I think is very detrimental in child development, and something that I've definitely tried to steer away from when I've been raising my own daughter. In fact, the dedication in my book to her is to her, saying that I want to encourage her. I hope that she always has the courage to speak up and know that her voice will be heard. Um, and I've seen amazing examples of that in some of the speakers that I've worked with to coach in speaker coaching, where they have said some things that you would expect people would never talk about, from infidelity to mental health issues, suicide. And every time somebody has said that thing that they shouldn't have, the impact that it's had. I remember speaking at an event called Life by Design, and there was two main presenters, myself and then this other gentleman, Jared. And Jared closed the evening, and thank goodness he did, because his my talk had impact, but his changed lives, literally. He has this incredible talk called The 10-Minute Time Machine. And in it, he discusses going back to the 10 minutes that changed his life. And he had battled with mental health issues for a very long time. He was heavily addicted to substances, drugs and alcohol, and battled suicidal thoughts for years, since his late teens, and had basically made it a mission. His marriage had fallen apart at that point because of his battle and his struggles. And he talks about this day where, for some reason, somehow, even though he wasn't allowed to see his kids, he had put together enough of a pretend front to fake through sobriety for a couple of days for somebody's birthday party. I can't remember if it was one of the kids or his ex-wife's. And his ex-wife just needed a break. And her new partner had agreed to allow him to watch the kids for the evening. And he battled through, he's going to stay sober, and he put the kids to bed, and then he went to bed, and in drifting off to unconsciousness and then coming back to consciousness, completely and totally forgot that the kids were there. And his nightly routine was to try as many combinations of pharmaceuticals and alcohol that he could, so that he could take his life in a way that looked accidental, so that it didn't void his life insurance. And that was his goal every night. And this night, for whatever reason, he then forgot that the kids were there, started to get high, realized the kids were there, thought that couldn't possibly be it, and that he had finally snapped mentally, that he was hallucinating that his kids were there, so he can just continued on with this process. And it was the day that he got it right. He found that magic combination that was going to kill him. But his son woke up, found him on the couch, and phoned 911 to say, my daddy isn't breathing. And he's telling this story. And I mean, just look at, I can't tell it nearly as good as he can, David, and yet look at how it's impacted you.
Yeah.
And what he talks about in the 10-Minute Time Machine is, if he could go back in time and change it, would he? And the answer is no, he would not. Because he needed that wake-up call. He needed the reason to live, because in his body, at that point, things were going south rapidly. and he knew that he had got it right. And then when his son's face came into focus, all he could think about was, please God, not now. Please God, not now. This can't be the time. It can't be today. It can't be today. And that became the mantra in his head. It can't be today. It can't be today. And that was the decision for him. Now he's been in AA for, I think this is coming up his 5th birthday. Or it's just passed. I believe this event happened in February and 5 years ago. And he's been sober ever since. I'm not sure that he's ever had a relapse. If he did, it was very briefly and within a couple of months of that. And then from that point on, he's found an incredible partner who supports him. His relationship with his kids has become stronger. His relationship with his family has become stronger. With his ex-wife has become stronger. Professionally, he has grown and found his rhythm. And all of these things came from finding rock bottom. But when he shared that story at Life by Design, I mean, this is the impact that it had. But here's the thing. Sitting in the audience was a girl who was gifted this ticket by a friend who knew that she was just struggling. She didn't know why she was struggling. She just knew that she wasn't happy. In Life by Design being a professional or personal development seminar, she thought, well, maybe you'll find something here that helps. What her friend didn't know was that this woman had been planning her death for months and had planned on going to the event to be polite to her friend and then taking a shotgun into the woods and taking her life on the Monday after the event. And when Jared stood up and told his story, she went, not today. It's not today. Today is not the day. And she reached out to Jared after and said, listen, this is where I'm at, and I think I need some help. And they found help for her. Fast forward 1 year later, she then talked at Life by Design to say, this is what happened to me. 3 people in the audience were struggling with the same issue and reached out to her and said, I need help. So with one person sharing one story and changing one other person's life, that person shared their story in a very open and vulnerable way and changed 3 other lives. And it just goes on like that. And that's why I say the thing that you're afraid to say probably is what the world needs to hear. You will find the audience that it resonates with, and you don't know who needs to hear that you are struggling the same way that they are struggling, or that you have triumphed the way that they want to triumph. Because that's the thing. Jared's story is about struggle, yes, but it's ultimately about triumph. Look what I have done despite this. Look at what I've done because of this. Look what can be possible. So it's not all doom and gloom. Yeah, you may be in a dark place, but how did you triumph, or what do you need to triumph? And you might then find the person by saying, I'm having this problem. You might find, you don't know if you're Jared or if you're the lady in the audience. You could be both. But until you speak up, you won't know where you're at or who could help you or who you could help. And that's why it's so important to say these things and to get them off your chest.
Tyler, thank you so much. That is a wonderful, wonderful lesson to share with my listeners. I'm so grateful that you told that story. And I agree 100%. I think people need to stand up and say the hard things. They need to tell their truth because there's always someone who needs to hear it.
Yeah.
So before I let you go, you mentioned that you published a book. Would you mind just sharing with everyone a little bit about your book and how to reach out to you personally if they, wanted to connect?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book that I wrote, I actually didn't even write. I know you're an author yourself. You'll understand this. I actually spoke my book, which is ironic given that it's called The Power to Speak Naked. It came about as a series of training seminars that I've put on, and we record them regularly. And I took all of the bits of the best when I was on fire on stage, when I had found my inspiration. We would take the audio from it, transcribe it, and then that got compiled into 10 chapters into the book. And it discusses, how to be more confident saying your message so that people can be authentic. And for me, authentic is synonymous with self-awareness. So we need to know who we are in order to share these stories. And how do you craft those stories? How do you tell them effectively, so that you can say the thing that you're afraid to say and not be afraid to say it? And that's how the book came to be about. And if anybody wants any information on me or the book or anything else, they can find it at SeanTylerFoley.com, SeanTylerFoley. So Sean is spelled the proper Irish way. And I would encourage them, if they are curious about getting the book, or your book too, David, if they want to get any book, I would encourage them to go to bookshop.org if they could. Because Jeff Bezos has made enough money in his life. He is apparently, going to be the next billionaire in space. So we don't need to support or line the pockets of Jeff Bezos anymore. And yeah, you could go to Barnes and Noble or some of those other stores and get it. But bookshop.org will connect your listeners online to their local book retailer, the mom and pop shop, the brick and mortar one. And one of the nice things about bookshop.org is that they can actually get a lot of these titles, yours and mine included, for a little bit less than what they can get at a regular retailer. And those profits go to support local book retailers, and the local book retailer will get the sale. So if anybody is interested in any title, I don't care what book you want to read, whether it's The Power to Speak Naked, whether it's your title, whether it's Harry Potter, whatever is floating your boat, whatever read that you want this week or this month or this year, if you could go to bookshop.org so that you can support your local book retailers. They have every title that you can get there anyway. It's going to save you a little bit of money. It's going to support your mom and pop book retailer. And I think that ultimately is the best thing to do. So for any book, mine or yours or anyone else's, please go to bookshop.org.
Awesome. And then can people connect with you on social media?
Yeah, all my socials are on the website. So if they go to SeanTylerFoley.com, they can catch me there, or they can search me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I don't TikTok yet, but I've got a 12-year-old who's showing me how to do it. So I don't know, maybe I'll be on TikTok here in a little bit. I don't know.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time this morning. I loved your everyday lesson. I'm so grateful that you took the time to chat with us, and I'll let you go about your day. Have an awesome day. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, David.
I don't know about you, but I was on the edge of my seat when Tyler shared his everyday lesson by telling Jared's story, a story that saved lives because he was brave enough to tell it. I'm often asked, and often with implied criticism, why I decided to be so transparent in my book. I often wonder that myself. Why did I feel the need to confess to the whole world what a jerk husband and father I was being to my family? Why didn't I just keep my journey from grumpy to grateful to myself? Just reading really changed me. I didn't have to write it and share it with the whole world. After all, that wasn't my intention. But after releasing the book, I started to get feedback from readers that told me that I had helped improve their marriages or even save them in a case or two. So I knew that putting my story out there for the world to hear was the right thing to do. And that's why I continue to invite guests who are brave enough to share their stories. I really think that little by little, we're doing good work and maybe even making the world a better place. And so I challenge you, write "say it" on your wrist. Then say the thing you've been afraid to say. Because as Tyler likes to say, it's very likely the thing that the world needs to hear. If you need a platform upon which to say it, let me know. I'm always looking for brave guests to share their everyday lessons with the world. Let me know what happens when you implement this lesson by reaching out to me at everydaylessonseveryday.com. You can also purchase my book while you're there or learn about hiring me to speak about personal improvement at your upcoming event. If you like the stories brought to you by Everyday Lessons Every Day, please consider writing a review. And also, please share this podcast on your social media feeds. Let's see if together we can make the world a better place. I'll see you next time. Now go out there and do something awesome.